If that dog bites me, I swear I'm suing the whole shelter. I said out loud, mostly to myself as I stood frozen in front of Kennel 19. I hadn't meant for it to come out like that, but the woman walking by with a mop stopped and looked me over, one eyebrow raised. "He won't bite." She said, "He's just different." Different. The word hung in the air like a challenge. I'd volunteered at enough shelters over the years to know what different meant. It meant the dog had been here too long. Meant the staff had run out of euphemisms. Meant nobody wanted him, and nobody could figure out how to fix that. The dog sat still behind the chain-link door, not barking. Not moving, just watching. His fur was a wild tangle of grays and tans, long around the ears and patchy along the sides. He looked like someone had tried to make a mop into a wolf and quit. Halfway through, one eye was cloudy. The other sparkled bright and yellow. There was something in that eye. Not fear, not anger. Something else. Curiosity. Maybe I stepped closer. He didn't growl, didn't cower, just watched me. "What's his name?" I asked the woman. Shrugged tag, just says Ronnie. He came in with it. No chip, no records, nothing. Ronnie didn't suit him at all, but I wasn't here to rename dogs. I was here because I'd told my brother I was ready to adopt again. It had been 2 years since I lost Rusty, my golden retriever. And honestly, I hadn't thought I'd ever be able to fill that hole again. But things change. People heal. At least that's what everyone kept saying. I crouched and peered through the cage bars. "Hey, Ronnie," I said softly. Still nothing. Not even a tail wag. "I'll give you a minute," the staffer said and walked off with her mop. I stayed there, crouched like a fool, trying to get a feel for this strange, silent creature. He blinked slowly his head. T.I. tilted just an inch, and then I saw it, the tag on his collar. It wasn't a standard ID tag. It was worn brass, round like a coin. I squinted. Something was written on it. I leaned in, closer. Read it. The woman's voice called from down the hallway. "It's the only reason we haven't put him down yet." Put him down. The word punched me in the chest. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and aimed it through the bars. The tag read, "If you're reading this, I was loved." Once I felt a lump rise in my throat. "Come on, Ronnie," I said. "Let's get you out of here." He didn't move. The staffer returned with a set of keys. "You sure about this one?" "Yeah," I said, not taking my eyes off him. HEK. The one she opened the kennel door slowly. Ronnie didn't lunge, didn't bolt. He stood, joints creaking, and walked out like an old man who knew there was no hurry. The hallway was silent. Even the other dogs who'd been barking seconds before were quiet now. He stood beside me, just stood like he was waiting. I reached down, my hand hovered above his matted head for a second, and then I rested it gently on top. He didn't flinch. I felt the softest tail wag against my ankle. Outside the sun was too bright, the kind of winter sun that makes everything look sharper, cleaner. I opened the passenger door of my truck up. "You go." He looked at the seat, then at me. "You're not heavy." I said. "And I've lifted heavier." He stepped up like he'd done it 100 times before. Settled into the seat, curled up tight. We drove home in silence except for the soft sound of his breathing at the house. He took one slow tour of the living room, sniffed. Each corner, then stood in front of Rusty's old bed. "You can have it," I said. I kept it clean. He circled once, twice, then lay down with a sigh that sounded like it carried years. I sat on the couch, unsure what came next. The room felt different, warmer that night. He didn't bark, didn't whine, just slept the next morning. I made eggs. He didn't beg, just sat by the kitchen door and waited. "You're polite, I'll give you that." I said. His ears twitched. Days passed, each one a little less quiet. He started following me from room to room, sat by the bathroom door, waited outside. The garage, walked beside me on the leash without tugging. I gave him a proper bath one morning. The fur underneath was a rich golden brown streak with white. He looked 10 pounds lighter still. Not a Ronnie, I muttered. I took him to the vet. She ran her hands over him, checked his joints. His teeth said he was old. Maybe 10, maybe more. He's been through something, she said. But he's healthy as any senior mutt could be. Senior. I started buying him soft chews and joint supplements, watched as his steps grew quicker, his eyes brighter, but he still didn't bark. Not once. One night, I dug through a box of Rusty's old things photos mostly, and a few notes cards from neighbors. I found a worn-out tennis ball and rolled it across the floor. Ronnie watched it go. Then he looked at me, walked over and nudged it back. It was the first time I laughed out loud in weeks. He wagged his tail and did it again. A week later, we visited the park. I took a seat on the bench, Ronnie by my side. A young couple walked past with a toddler holding an ice cream cone. The kid stumbled, dropped the cone, and started to cry. Ronnie stood up, walked over, sat in front of the child, and licked the ice cream off the grass. The kid stopped crying. The mom smiled. "Heun's got good manners," she said. I nodded. Heun's got a good heart that night. I reached for his tag again. "If you're reading this, I was loved. Once you still are," I whispered. He rested his head on my foot. I didn't move for a long time. The next morning, I called. The shelter told them I wanted to cover the adoption fee for the next 3 senior dogs because of Ronnie. The staff asked because someone loved him enough to leave that message. And now it's my turn. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "We just got a 12-year-old beagle in no tag. No name. Think someone like you will come for him too." "I hope so," I said. "I really hope so." That night, as I sat on the porch, Ronnie by my side, I looked up at the stars. He was snoring gently, one paw twitching in his sleep. I reached down, ran a hand through his fur, and felt that old brass tag, loved once. Now loved again. And that was just the beginning. Ronnie barked not a big bark. Not even a real one. More like a muffled wolf that surprised even him. He looked at me afterward like he'd accidentally knocked something off a table and wasn't sure if he was in trouble. "You've got a voice," I said, setting down my coffee. His ears twitched. "Took you long enough. It had been just over a month since I brought him home." The silence that once hung around him like a heavy coat had started to loosen. He made noises now. Grunts when he lay down, little puffs of breath, when he watched squirrels from the porch. And today, his first real attempt at a bark. I scratched under his chin. "You're figuring it out, huh?" He licked my wrist and wandered to the window paw resting on the sill. The neighborhood was quiet. Snow lined the curbs, the kind that stuck around without melting. I watched as his tail swayed slowly. I hadn't planned to keep his name, but Ronnie had stuck. Maybe it wasn't the name I would have chosen, but he seemed to respond to it in his own way. More importantly, he'd started responding to me. We had our routines now, morning walks to the mailbox, slow strolls around the cul-de-sac in the afternoons. Evening couch, time he liked documentaries, or maybe he just liked the sound of my voice when I muttered commentary at the screen. And once a week we drove to the park. That's where we were headed. "Now, come on, old man," I said, grabbing his leash. He trotted over a little bounce in his step. I clipped the leash on, and he was already at the door before I finished. The truck ride was quiet as usual. I talked. He listened at the park. Ronnie walked like he owned it. Not proud, but comfortable. He sniffed every bush like he was checking on tenants, nodded at other dogs like he knew them. Most of them ignored him, a few barked from a distance. One small white poodle mix tried to run up to him, but Ronnie gave a short, low growl. Not threatening, just enough to say he wasn't interested. He's got boundaries. I explained to the owner, a man in his 60s with a thick flannel coat that's rare. The man replied, smiling. Most dogs his age get too soft. Ronnie led me to the same bench we always stopped at near the pond where ducks huddled on the frozen surface. He didn't sit, yet, just stood staring at the water. "You used to come here, didn't you?" I asked. He didn't look at me, but his ears flicked once it was a hunch. Something about how comfortable he seemed. How he walked without hesitation, like he knew exactly where each path led. I watched him trying to picture him younger. More energy in his legs, fewer scars on his nose. Maybe a little boy beside him, or a man, or both. That tag, someone had loved him deeply enough to give him a voice when he had none. I sat down. Ronnie finally did too, pressing his side to my leg. We stayed that way until the cold started settling through my jacket. On the drive back, I stopped by the local hardware store, the kind with creaky floors and hand-painted signs. I needed some brackets for the porch steps, but I figured I'd let Ronnie have his say about the place stay. I told him, cracking the window a bit. He stayed, didn't bark, didn't whine. Just waited inside. The clerk recognized me. "You're the guy with the shaggy dog." "That's me." "He's something my niece volunteers at the shelter said. You saved his life." I shrugged. "He saved mine too, probably." She handed me the brackets and leaned forward. "You should come to the community event, Saturday. Seniors are bringing their adopted dogs for a little meetup. It's nothing big, just some folding chairs and coffee. He doesn't really like crowds. Neither do most of the dogs." That's the point. Ronnie was sitting taller when I got back to the truck watching the door. "We've got an invite, buddy. You feel like being social this weekend." He sneezed. "I'll take that as a maybe at home." I noticed the silence again. Not the heavy kind. A good one. Comfortable, like a pause in a story where the best part is coming next. Friday night, I gave Ronnie another bath, brushed him out until he looked more dog and less tumbleweed. His coat had grown softer since the day I found him. The patchy spots were filling in. He still had one cloudy eye, but the other one gleamed with something new. Light, I guess, or trust you ready for Saturday. He licked his paw and ignored me. Saturday morning came with frost on the windows and the sound of salt trucks in the distance. I packed a thermos of coffee and an old blanket for the folding chairs. Ronnie climbed into the truck like it was just another day. The event was held at the edge of the park near the rec center. About a dozen people stood around in coats and scarves, holding leashes or tossing tennis balls. Every dog there moved slowly. A few limped. One was in a doggy wheelchair. I spotted the flannel coat from the park. The man waved. "Glad you came. What's his name again?" "Ronnie," the man smiled. "Looks better already." We stood together, making small talk. Ronnie sat quietly beside me, observing the other dogs. He didn't approach. Anyone didn't try to play, but he didn't retreat either. One of the organizers handed me a Polaroid camera. Mind. If we take a picture for the board, we're starting a wall of second chances. I looked at Ronnie. Smile. Old man. He didn't, of course. But he looked at the camera with that curious tilt of his head. They snapped the photo, wrote our names on the bottom, and clipped it to a corkboard under a sign that said, "Found each other." We didn't stay long. Ronnie gave me a glance after half an hour that clearly meant we're done here. On the way home, we stopped at the corner store. I let him pick a toy from the little rack by the counter. He sniffed a rubber chicken, a plush squirrel, and finally settled on a stuffed star with a smiley face. I wasn't sure why, but he held it in his mouth all the way to the truck that night. He lay on the rug, chewing the star slowly, not with excitement, more like he was savoring it. I poured myself a drink and sat down beside him. "You know," I said, "you could have ended up anywhere, and here we are." He paused, looked up at me and dropped the toy. Then, for the first time, he did something he hadn't done before. He rested his head in my lap. I sat still, not wanting to ruin the moment we stayed like that until the ice in my glass melted. Sunday morning, I found myself up early, too early. Ronnie was still asleep, curled tightly in Rusty's old bed. I made coffee, then sat with the photo from the event, our picture clipped to the fridge now, with a magnet shaped like a bone. I wondered who had loved him before, what kind of life he'd had, what kind of people had given him that tag. Maybe it didn't matter. He was here now, safe, warm, wanted. But the thought lingered later that day. I made a call. "Hi," I said to the shelter director. "Do you still have Ronnie's intake records?" "Not much, just what was on the tag." "Can I see it, the tag? You have it?" "I mean the back. We never looked." I checked the back was nearly worn smooth, but under the right light I saw it and address faded. Scratched, but legible. "Not far," I told Ronnie. "Even though he probably didn't understand, we're going on a road trip tomorrow." He lifted his head just to see nothing more. The next morning we drove west just 20 miles through smaller roads, and out past the edge of town the address led to a farmhouse not run down but not prize. Either lived in a man in his 70s, stepped onto the porch as we pulled in. He had a cane and a deep furrow between his eyes. "Can I help you?" I got out slowly. Ronnie stayed in the truck. "Sorry to bother you," I said. "I adopted a dog a while back, found your address on his old tag." The man's face didn't change. Not at first. He's got one cloudy eye. "Shaggy coat answers to Ronnie." The man stepped forward slowly. "You brought him. He's in the truck." The man walked closer. I opened the door. Ronnie sat watching, then his ears perked. The old man said one word. "Tucker," and Ronnie whined. Not a sad sound. Not scared, just recognition. I opened the door wider. Ronnie stepped out, walked up to the man, sniffed his shoes, and leaned against his leg. The man dropped his cane. He didn't fall, just knelt both hands in Ronnie's fur. He was my son's. I waited. My boy died 4 years ago. I couldn't take care of Tucker after that. I tried, but I wasn't right. And one day he ran off. I figured he was gone for good. He looked at me. "You called him Ronnie."